Jack Mitchell sat at his small, cluttered desk in the back office of his auto repair shop, staring at the framed photo of his wife, Emily. The picture captured them on their 10th anniversary, smiling in front of the mountains during their hiking trip. It was a perfect moment in what he had always considered a perfect life. As the owner of a modest but successful business, Jack found satisfaction in the steady hum of engines and the camaraderie of his loyal crew. Emily, meanwhile, was thriving as a lawyer at a prestigious firm, her intelligence and determination earning her accolades and respect. Together, they seemed to have it all: a beautiful home, financial security, and a love that had weathered life's ups and downs. Yet, recently, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Emily had always been busy, but in the past few months, her late nights at the office had become increasingly frequent. Her once vibrant conversations were now littered with vague descriptions of demanding cases and a need to impress senior partners. While Jack admired her dedication, he couldn't help but notice a change in her demeanor. The warmth in her eyes seemed dimmed, replaced by an inexplicable distance that left Jack feeling cold. It began subtly enough. Emily would come home later and later, often apologizing with a distracted kiss on his cheek before retreating to her office to continue working. Jack tried to be understanding, reminding himself of the pressures of her job. He would spend his evenings alone, cooking dinner and watching TV, waiting for her footsteps on the porch. But the dinners grew cold, and the wait grew long. Jack noticed other changes, too. Emily's laughter, once frequent and genuine, became forced and rare. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now felt like pulling teeth. Whenever Jack asked about her day, Emily would respond with short, clipped answers, her mind clearly elsewhere. There were moments when Jack caught her staring off into space, a faraway look in her eyes that he couldn't reach. As weeks turned into months, Jack's unease grew into something he couldn't ignore. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Emily slept beside him, her back turned. His mind raced with thoughts he didn't want to entertain but couldn't shake. Was she hiding something? Was there someone else? The doubts gnawed at him, yet he pushed them aside, unwilling to confront the possibility of betrayal. During a rare weekend breakfast together, Jack tried to broach the subject. Are you okay? You seem different lately, he said gently, searching her face for clues. Emily paused, her fork hovering over her plate. Just tired, Jack. Work's been crazy, she replied, avoiding his gaze. You know how it is. Jack nodded, but her words did little to comfort him. Instead, they deepened the chasm between them, leaving Jack feeling more isolated than ever. He missed the closeness they once shared, the late-night talks and spontaneous adventures. He missed the woman who had been his partner in everything, who now felt like a stranger. The call came on a dreary Thursday evening as Jack was finishing up the day's work at the garage. He wiped his hands on a rag, glancing at his phone as it buzzed on the workbench. Emily's name flashed on the screen, and he picked it up, feeling a mix of relief and hope that she might be coming home early for once. Hey, Jack, Emily's voice came through, clipped and distant, devoid of the warmth he once cherished. I have a late-night case review. Don't wait up. Jack paused, the rag clenched tightly in his fist. Again? Is everything okay? You sound— It's fine, Emily interrupted, her impatience palpable. I just have a lot on my plate right now. I'll see you in the morning. Before Jack could respond, the line went dead. He stood there, staring at his phone, a heavy weight settling in his chest. Her dismissive tone echoed in his mind, fueling the anxiety that had become all too familiar. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her late nights than just work. After dinner, Jack sat alone on the couch, watching the clock tick toward midnight. His mind was a whirlpool of suspicion and doubt, each thought more unsettling than the last. He knew he needed to trust Emily, but her recent behavior had chipped away at his confidence. By 2 a.m., Jack's unease had reached a tipping point. He grabbed his car keys, driven by an inexplicable urge to confront the nagging questions that refused to let him rest. His hands trembled slightly as he started the car, a mix of fear and anticipation churning in his stomach. He felt as though he was crossing a threshold, stepping into a reality he had hoped never to face. The drive to Emily's office was a blur, the deserted streets echoing his sense of isolation. As he pulled into the parking lot, Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark except for a faint glow emanating from Emily's office. Stepping out of the car, Jack's breath came in shallow gasps. He approached the entrance, each step heavy with dread. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. He wanted to believe that he was wrong, that his fears were unfounded, but the gnawing uncertainty was relentless. As he neared Emily's office, the faint sound of laughter and moaning voices reached his ears. He paused, straining to hear more, his heart sinking with every word. Then came the unmistakable sound of Emily's voice, soft and intimate, followed by a man's deeper tone. Jack's mind went blank, his body moving on autopilot as he pushed open the door. The scene before him unfolded like a nightmare, a tableau of betrayal that shattered his world in an instant. Emily was there. His jaw dropped when I saw her sitting on top of another man, ridding it and kissed passionately, their bodies entwined in a moment of passion that was both raw and undeniable. For a moment, time stood still. Jack felt his heart constrict, the pain like a physical blow. Emily's head turned, her eyes meeting his with a mix of shock and something else, a flicker of guilt, perhaps, or defiance. Her lover froze, his expression morphing from surprise to realization as he processed the intruder's identity. "Jack," Emily gasped, her voice barely audible over the pounding in Jack's ears. The silence in the room was deafening, a tense pause before the storm. Jack stood in the doorway, his heart a tangled mess of heartbreak and rage. Each beat felt like a hammer against his chest, driving home the reality of what he had just witnessed. The scene unfolded before him, surreal and brutal, as if he were trapped in a terrible dream from which he could not awaken. Emily and her lover froze, caught in a web of betrayal that they could not deny. The man, a tall, athletic figure with chiseled features, seemed bewildered, his eyes darting between Jack and Emily. Jack's gaze locked onto Emily's, searching for something, an explanation, a flicker of remorse, anything to justify the wound she had inflicted on his heart. Emily's face was a canvas of shock and fear. Her eyes, wide and uncertain, betrayed the calm facade she struggled to maintain. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, leaving only the harsh sound of her breathing in the charged air. Jack could see the panic rising within her, the realization of her betrayal crashing down like a tidal wave. "Babe, who's this man?" The lover's voice broke the silence, hesitant and wary. His words hung in the air, an intrusion on the moment of reckoning. Emily blinked, her composure faltering. "That's my stupid husband," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. The words cut through Jack like a blade, her casual tone a bitter insult to the love they had once shared. In that instant, something inside him snapped, the dam of emotions giving way to a torrent of anger. Jack stepped into the room, his presence electrifying the air with tension. The anger within him burned hot and fierce, consuming the pain and confusion that had plagued him for months. It was as if he had become a force of nature, driven by a primal urge to reclaim what had been stolen from him. "Emily," he said, his voice low and trembling with barely restrained fury. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Emily's eyes flickered with defiance, her lips curving into a mocking smile. "What did you expect, Jack? You're never around. You're always too busy with your cars and your shop." Her words stung, the dismissive tone a slap in the face. Jack clenched his fists, struggling to contain the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. "And that justifies this?" he spat, gesturing towards the man who had dared to come between them. "You betrayed everything we built together for this?" The lover shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the danger in Jack's eyes. "Look, man, I didn't know." "Save it." Jack cut him off, his voice cold and hard. "I don't want to hear it." The tension in the room crackled like electricity, the air thick with the weight of unspoken words. Emily's expression wavered, guilt battling with defiance in her eyes. Jack felt his heart ache at the sight, a deep sorrow mingling with the anger that refused to abate. "Jack, please," Emily began, her voice softer now, pleading. I never meant for you to find out like this. Find out what, exactly? Jack demanded, his voice rising. That our marriage was just a convenience for you? That I was just some stupid husband you could use and toss aside when it suited you? The words hung in the air, echoing through the room. Jack watched as Emily's resolve crumbled, her bravado fading in the face of his unrelenting anger. Her lover shifted again, clearly uncomfortable with the intensity of the confrontation. Emily started. But Jack held up a hand, silencing her. No more lies, Emily. I deserve better than this, he said, his voice heavy with finality. Jack stood at the center of a storm, his world collapsing around him as he faced the betrayal that had pierced his heart. His hand moved almost of its own volition, striking Emily across the face with a force that shocked even him. The room went silent, the only sound the sharp crack of the impact. Emily staggered backward, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain. She teetered on her heels, a hand flying to her cheek as she tried to steady herself, a small gasp escaping her lips. Time seemed to slow as Jack watched the scene unfold, his mind struggling to process what he had done. Emily wavered, her knees buckling beneath her. For a moment, it seemed as if she might faint, but she caught herself on the edge of the desk, her knuckles white as she gripped the surface for support. A flash of regret pierced Jack's anger, but it was quickly swallowed by the intensity of the moment. Emily's lover remained frozen, his eyes wide with fear and confusion as he took in the volatile scene. Jack, what the hell? Emily gasped, her voice trembling as she regained her footing. Her eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and hurt, a reflection of the storm inside Jack. But Jack's focus shifted, the fury within him seeking another target. He turned his attention to Emily's lover, his eyes narrowing as he advanced on the man. The lover, a once confident figure, now cowered in fear, his bravado shattered by the reality of the situation. Please, man, I didn't know, the lover stammered, his voice quivering as he raised his hands in a placating gesture. I swear, I didn't know she was married. Jack laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound that echoed through the room. Didn't know? Didn't care? You mean, he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You're just another excuse, another reason for her to throw away everything we had. The lover took a step back, his eyes darting toward the door as if calculating his chances of escape. But Jack was relentless, closing the distance between them with a single step. How could you do this to me, bitch? Jack demanded, his voice rising. Do you have any idea what you've done? Chaos erupted, the office becoming a battleground of emotions. Papers and files scattered across the floor as Jack advanced, his anger manifesting in the disarray that surrounded them. Emily scrambled to intervene, her voice breaking through the cacophony as she pleaded for calm. Jack, stop it, she cried, her tone a mixture of desperation and authority. This isn't going to solve anything. But Jack was beyond reasoning, his heart a maelstrom of betrayal that refused to be calmed. He rounded on Emily, his eyes blazing with a fire that matched her own. You made this mess, Emily, he shouted, his voice hoarse with emotion. You brought this chaos into our lives. Emily flinched, her eyes flashing with anger and defiance. She stepped between Jack and her lover, her arms spread wide as if to shield him. And what about you, Jack? Always at the garage, always working late? Do you think you're blameless in this? Her words hit Jack like a physical blow, the weight of truth mingling with the bitterness of betrayal. The room was a tempest of emotions, each word adding fuel to the fire that raged between them. In that moment, Jack realized that the chaos was not just external but internal as well, a reflection of the turmoil that had been brewing beneath the surface for months. The confrontation had laid bare the fractures in their relationship, the unresolved issues that had festered in silence. But amidst the chaos, a sliver of clarity emerged. Jack knew that violence and anger were not the answers, that the path forward required something more than vengeance. He took a step back, the heat of the moment giving way to a cooler, more resolute determination. Enough, he said, his voice firm and steady. This ends now. With those words, the tension in the room shifted, the chaos ebbing as the three of them stood at the crossroads of their shared history. Jack knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and pain, but he was ready to face it with the same resolve that had brought him here. As he turned to leave, the silence in the room was no longer oppressive, but full of unspoken possibilities. Jack walked out of the office, his heart heavy but his spirit unbroken, ready to reclaim his life from the wreckage of betrayal. The drive home felt like an eternity for Jack, each passing streetlight illuminating the turmoil that had taken root in his mind. The adrenaline that had fueled his earlier confrontation was gone, leaving behind a heavy sense of regret and exhaustion. As he pulled into the driveway of his modest suburban home, the reality of what had transpired began to settle in, each thought a sharp reminder of the chaos he had left behind. Inside the house, silence greeted him, an oppressive quiet that contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions raging within. Jack collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands, as he struggled to process the gravity of his actions. He replayed the scene at Emily's office over and over in his mind, each detail etched in painful clarity. The shock, the anger, the violence, it all felt like a dream. Yet the consequences were all too real. Emily's betrayal cut deep, but Jack's actions had also crossed a line he never thought he would. Hitting her, losing control, it was a part of himself he didn't recognize, a part he knew he had to confront. But amid the guilt and self-reproach, a steely resolve began to form. He knew he had to act wisely from this point forward, to navigate the tangled web of emotions and repercussions that lay ahead. Meanwhile, back at the office, Emily was trying to regain her composure. She paced the room, her mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. Her lover, still shaken, sat at the desk, nursing a bruise that would serve as a reminder of the night's events. The atmosphere was tense, charged with unspoken blame and regret. "You need to fix this," the lover said finally, his voice laced with a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't afford to get caught up in this mess. My career—" Emily cut him off, a cold determination in her eyes. I know, she replied, her voice tight. She understood the precariousness of their situation, the potential fallout that could ruin both their careers. As if on cue, her lover voiced the thought that had been gnawing at her mind. "I'm going to talk to my lawyer," he said, a thinly veiled threat underlying his words. "I need to protect myself, Emily. If this gets out—" Emily nodded, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. She realized that her choices had led her to this precarious moment, where her personal and professional lives hung in the balance. The affair, once a source of excitement and escape, now threatened to unravel everything she had worked for. Back at home, Jack sat in silence, contemplating his next move. He knew that confronting Emily and her lover had only been the beginning. There were legal ramifications to consider, potential fallout that could impact his life just as profoundly. Despite his anger and betrayal, he knew he had to approach the situation with a clear mind and a steady hand. Jack picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number of a lawyer he had met through a mutual friend. He hesitated for a moment, the enormity of his decision weighing on him. But he knew he had to protect himself, to take action that would secure his future and address the wrongs that had been done. "I can't let this define me," Jack murmured to himself, his voice firm with resolve. He dialed the number, listening to the ringing tone as he prepared to take the first step on a new path. The conversation was brief but informative, the lawyer outlining Jack's options and the steps he needed to take. As he hung up, Jack felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge from the chaos. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and heartache, but he was ready to face it. With a deep breath, Jack stood up, determination etched on his face. He would fight for what was right, for the life he deserved. And while the past could not be undone, the future was a blank slate, waiting to be written anew. As he looked around the familiar comfort of his home, Jack knew that he was not alone, that he had the strength and resilience to weather the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the room as Jack sat at his kitchen table, nursing a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The events of the previous night were still fresh in his mind, each detail a vivid reminder of the betrayal that had shattered his world. But today, instead of despair, Jack felt a burgeoning sense of purpose. It was time to seek justice, to reclaim his life and ensure that Emily faced the consequences of her actions. After the call with his lawyer the night before, Jack knew he had to move quickly. He spent the morning gathering documents and evidence, anything that might aid his case. It was a daunting task, but each piece of paper, each email and text message he collected felt like a step toward regaining control. His phone buzzed, and Jack glanced at the screen to see a message from his lawyer, Richard Hargrove. Richard was known for his tenacity in court and had a reputation for handling complex divorce cases with finesse. He had agreed to meet Jack at his office later that morning, and Jack felt a sense of relief at having someone on his side who understood the stakes. Arriving at the lawyer's office, Jack was greeted by Richard, a man in his 50s with sharp features and a reassuring presence. Richard extended a firm handshake, his expression one of understanding and determination. "Jack, it's good to meet you," Richard said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I've reviewed the initial details you sent over. You've got a solid case here. We can move forward with filing for divorce and consider additional actions to protect your interests." Jack nodded, grateful for Richard's confidence. "I want to make sure this doesn't go away quietly," he said, his voice steady. "Emily needs to face the consequences, both personally and professionally." Richard leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Exposing the affair publicly will have significant implications for her career, especially given her position at the firm. But we need to proceed carefully. Our goal is to protect you and ensure that any actions we take are within legal bounds." Jack listened, feeling the weight of the decision before him. He knew that pursuing public exposure of Emily's infidelity could have serious repercussions, but he also felt a deep need for accountability, not just for himself but for the integrity of their marriage that had been trampled. As Jack and Richard continued to discuss strategy, Emily was facing her own reality. She sat in her office, her mind racing with the potential fallout from Jack's actions. The lover, now distancing himself, had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with the scandal that threatened to engulf them. Emily picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over Jack's contact. She knew she needed to speak with him, to try and salvage what she could from the wreckage. After a moment's hesitation, she dialed his number, hoping for a chance to negotiate. Jack's phone rang, the familiar tone breaking the silence of Richard's office. He glanced at the screen, seeing Emily's name, and felt a mixture of emotions, anger, hurt, but also curiosity about what she might say. He answered the call, his voice cool and measured. "Emily." "Jack, please, can we talk?" Emily's voice was filled with urgency. "I know things are bad, but we need to find a way through this. We can work something out." Jack took a deep breath, his resolve firm. "There's nothing to work out, Emily. You made your choices, and now we have to deal with the consequences. I'm filing for divorce, and that's non-negotiable." Emily's tone shifted, a hint of desperation creeping in. "You don't have to do this, Jack. We can handle this privately without ruining everything we've built." But Jack was unmoved. "Everything we built is already ruined, Emily. You did that when you decided to cheat. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about what you did and how it reflects on who you are." As the call ended, Jack felt a sense of finality settle over him. The path ahead was clear, and while it was fraught with challenges, he knew he was ready to face them. With Richard's guidance, he would navigate the legal battle that lay ahead, seeking not just revenge but justice for the wrongs that had been done. As Jack left the lawyer's office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey to rebuild his life had begun, and he was determined to emerge stronger on the other side, his integrity intact and his future reclaimed. The consequences of betrayal began to ripple through Emily's life like a stone cast into a still pond. At her firm, whispers spread like wildfire, seeping through the polished hallways and boardrooms. What had begun as a scandal in a closed office became an open secret, a topic of hushed conversations in the break rooms and knowing glances exchanged over coffee. Emily felt the shift in the atmosphere the moment she stepped into the office, each interaction tinged with judgment and disdain. Her lover, once a rising star in the firm, faced immediate repercussions. The management acted swiftly, terminating his employment to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. As he packed his belongings into a cardboard box, Emily watched from her office window, the reality of her actions crystallizing in a way that was both harsh and inescapable. The ally she had once counted on was gone, leaving her isolated in a world she had meticulously built, now crumbling beneath her feet. Meanwhile, Jack found himself on a different path, a path of healing and renewal. His friends rallied around him, providing support and companionship as he navigated the turbulent aftermath of his marriage. Richard, his lawyer, became more than just legal counsel. He became a confidant and advisor, guiding Jack through the complexities of the divorce proceedings with steady professionalism. "You're stronger than you think, Jack," Richard said one afternoon as they reviewed documents in his office. "This is your opportunity to start fresh, to build a life that's truly yours." Jack nodded, absorbing Richard's words. He felt the truth in them, a burgeoning sense of resilience growing within him. The hurt was still there, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it became a catalyst for change, pushing him toward a future where he could thrive on his terms. Jack began exploring new hobbies, activities that brought him joy and allowed him to express himself. He took up photography, finding solace in capturing moments of beauty in the world around him. The lens became a way to see life anew, each photo a testament to his journey of healing and discovery. Through these new experiences, Jack met people who inspired and challenged him. One person, in particular, stood out, a woman named Lily, who shared his love for photography and had an infectious zest for life. They met at a photography workshop, and their connection was immediate and profound. Lily had her own stories of loss and resilience, and together, they found comfort and understanding in one another. As Jack healed, Emily faced the harsh reality of her choices. Alone in her office, she replayed the moments that had led her here, the decisions that had spiraled out of control. Her career, once her proudest achievement, was now a source of anxiety and uncertainty. She had built her success on hard work and determination, but now those qualities seemed insufficient to salvage the wreckage. In moments of solitude, Emily reflected on the life she had once shared with Jack, a life filled with love and promise. She remembered their early years, the dreams they had nurtured together, the laughter and warmth that had been their foundation. The contrast between then and now was stark and sobering. Emily realized that her actions had been a desperate escape from a life she felt was stagnating, a misguided attempt to reclaim something she believed she had lost. But in chasing that illusion, she had lost far more: trust, love, and the respect of those around her. Sitting alone in the dim glow of her office, Emily understood that she was responsible for her own downfall. Karma, in its relentless way, had come full circle, demanding payment for the choices she had made. It was a harsh lesson, but one she could no longer ignore. As the weeks passed, Emily struggled with the weight of regret, her life a stark contrast to the one she had envisioned. She found herself navigating a world that had grown unfamiliar, each day a reminder of the choices that had led to her downfall. Her career, once a source of pride and achievement, was now fraught with challenges and uncertainty. The whispers of her colleagues, the judgmental glances, they were constant reminders of the scandal that had marred her reputation. Alone in her apartment, Emily reflected on the life she had once shared with Jack. Memories of their happier times resurfaced, each recollection a poignant reminder of what she had lost. The laughter, the shared dreams, the love that had been the foundation of their marriage, it was all gone, replaced by a void that seemed impossible to fill. As she confronted her actions, Emily began to understand the true cost of her betrayal. In search of redemption, Emily reached out to Jack, hoping for one final conversation to find closure and perhaps a path to forgiveness. Jack agreed to meet her, understanding that this meeting was a necessary step in moving forward. They met at a small cafe, a neutral ground that offered a semblance of comfort amidst the tension. As they sat across from each other, the silence was heavy, each lost in their thoughts. Jack was struck by how different Emily appeared, more subdued, her confident demeanor tempered by the humility that comes from facing one's mistakes. "Thank you for meeting me," Emily began, her voice soft and sincere. "I know I've hurt you deeply, and I've been struggling with how to make amends. Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's been a journey, Emily, for both of us. I won't lie, it's been hard. But I've come to realize that holding on to anger won't change the past. Emily looked down, her eyes brimming with emotion. I'm sorry, Jack. Truly. I wish I could take it all back, but I know that's not possible. All I can do is learn from it and try to be better. Jack appreciated her candor, recognizing the sincerity in her words. We all make mistakes, he replied gently. What matters is how we move forward from them. I've learned that forgiveness is as much for me as it is for you. Their conversation flowed, each exchanging apologies and acknowledging the roles they had played in the dissolution of their marriage. It was a cathartic moment, a release of the tension and pain that had bound them. As they spoke, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him, a closure that allowed him to finally let go of the past. As they parted ways, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a mutual respect for the journey they had undertaken. Emily had a long road ahead, but Jack hoped she would find her own path to healing and redemption. With the weight of the past lifted, Jack felt ready to embrace the future with open arms. His life was his own, a blank canvas on which he could paint a new story, filled with promise and possibility. The lessons he had learned along the way had shaped him, and now, more than ever, he was prepared to live a life that was true to himself. As he walked away from the cafe, Jack felt the warmth of the sun on his face and knew that he was exactly where he needed to be, moving forward, one step at a time.